Going woke is destroying comics. Or at least that's what a lot of people have to say. But I disagree, sort of. So what do I mean? Well, when people talk about going woke, destroying comics, what they're usually talking about is that a big reason that they love comics is because it provides a form of escapism for them. In other words, this life is tough, especially now. The economy sucks, the housing market sucks, the dating market sucks, and we could just go on and on and on. And so a lot of people turn to comics just to take their minds off of the chaos that's around them. And they just want to get all of their stresses off their mind, even if just for this 5 minutes of reading this comic book. All they want to do is watch Hulk smash or Batman beat up the Joker again and just have, if only for a few minutes, some fun. And so when they pick up a comic book and instead of just seeing Hulk smash, they all of a sudden feel like they're being preached to by some type of social or political agenda, then it becomes a real turnoff for them because they're like, well, the whole reason I'm reading these comics is to get away from everything that's out there. And instead, this comic seems to be sucking me back into all these things that are out there. And so I just don't want anything to do with it. And I think there is some truth that there are a lot of collectors who are turning away from comic books because of that reason. But the reason why I don't think that going woke is destroying comics is because comics have always been woke, or in other words, progressive. And I was reminded of that this week when I was reading Punisher #3 from 1987. I'm going to show you some pages from that book in just a minute. But I don't think the messaging has changed that much in comics. But I think the way that we interpret that messaging has changed quite a bit. And I'm going to share some theories why after we take a look at Punisher #3. So issue 3 opens with the Punisher stopping a bank robbery and then chasing down the criminals who flee. And so he catches up to this guy and asks, "Who are you working for?" The guy says, "Colonel Joseph Fryer, U.S. Army retired." And the Punisher asks, "Who are you and why do you rob banks?" This guy says, "We're the army of the new American Revolution. This country was founded by white Christians. And unless white Christians stand together, this country will collapse. That was a Jew bank we robbed. We robbed banks to finance the new American Revolution." I've heard this song before. "All right, my white Christian friend, where can I find Colonel Fryer?" "Sherrill, Kansas. He's got a real estate office on Main Street." So the Punisher heads to Kansas, finds the colonel, and disguises himself as someone who's looking to set up a business in this podunk town of Sherrill. And so the colonel asks, "Well, why in the world do you want to set up a business here in the middle of nowhere?" And so the Punisher in disguise says, "The cities are filled with people who would rather steal a car than buy one." So the colonel says, "I know what you mean." The Punisher says, "I doubt it, Mr. Fryer. Living out here, you have no idea the depths of crime and degradation to which the cities have fallen." He says, "If you were speaking of the mongrelization of this great nation, I have a very good idea. Prime Minister Nakasone was right. This country is being mugged into mediocrity by blacks, Puerto Ricans, and Mexicans. It's worse than that, Arnold. What about the Jews? Judaism isn't a race, it's a religion. That's what they want you to think. The Jews have wriggled their way into positions of authority like snakes. They won't be satisfied until they own the entire country. They'll lock white Christian America out. This country was founded by white Christians," and so forth and so forth. Now, I think if we were reading that back in the 80s, it wouldn't have caused any waves. Everyone would just agree, oh yeah, these white extremists are really bad guys, and we're just looking forward to the Punisher killing them all. But I think if we read it today, a substantial part of the audience would be, oh, the Punisher's gone woke. It just won't stop talking about racism and white supremacy and so forth. Now, what has changed in the past 40 years to cause us to read this story so differently today? Well, I have a couple of theories. First of all, I think this is a symptom of the increasing polarization in our nation. In other words, back in 1987, everyone would have read this and said, oh, Mike Barron is talking about this 1% of white extremists, the KKK and maybe some neo-Nazis, things like that. And the rest of us, 99%, all of us normal people who are reading the comics, agree that those are the bad guys and we want to see them get their just desserts from the Punisher. But as our society has become more polarized over the past 10 years plus, we no longer see just 1% on each side as extremists. People on the right see everybody on the left as communists and socialists. People on the left see everybody on the right as Nazis and fascists. And so when people on the right hear people on the left talking about Nazism, white supremacy, fascism, all this kind of stuff, now they're saying, hey, you're not talking about this extreme 1%. You're dog whistling. You're actually talking about me. And so when they read something like The Punisher, they're saying, hey, Mike Barron is attacking me, targeting me. And they're saying, hey, I'm not a white supremacist. I'm just trying to get through this world. I just want to be able to buy gas, feed my family, and just get through things. And they feel targeted. And I think it would go the same way for people on the left feeling targeted from the right if there were comics about people being commies and socialists and all this kind of stuff. But it's just the reality that the majority of people in the arts are from the left side of the aisle for the last several decades. So there are just more opportunities for the right to feel attacked by the left. There are times where I think the left can feel the same thing. Some comic writer who's from the right talking about commies and socialists, feel like they're being attacked. It just, the type of writer is just more from the left than the right. That's just the way it is. Maybe that would be fitting to do another video on someday, why people on the left seem to gravitate towards the arts while people on the right don't. I think there's some reasons, and I think that's an interesting conversation. But I think it's the reality. At least it's the perceived reality if you disagree with me. And so this leads to people on the right feeling like they're being attacked when they're reading this comic book. And they're like, geez, man, I just wanted to get away from everything. And now all of a sudden I'm being attacked for being a white supremacist again, and I'm just out of here. It's just over. That's the way they feel, and I'm not saying that they should feel that way. I'm just explaining why I think people do feel that way. Again, right or wrong, not defending it. It's just the way that it is. Now, a second reason why I think people today would be more disturbed by this Punisher story is because everything has become so politicized. You try to buy a Coke and you're like, oh, what are you drinking, you commie? You supporting the elimination of white people from the workplace? Or you go to Chick-fil-A and they're like, oh, you supporting the bashing the gays, you Nazi fascist. And people, again, are just trying to escape that. Just get away. Man, I'm tired of being called a commie. I'm tired of being called a Nazi. I just want to read a comic book, have some fun. And then all of a sudden, these words that have become much more meaningful in our culture these days, much more comprehensive towards different demographics, then people just feel attacked. And again, they're just tired of it. They're just like, if I'm going to get attacked when I'm reading a comic book, I'm just out of here. Now, again, I'm not saying the authors are actually attacking people on the right or people on the left, but it's just the way people feel because of this overly politicized culture that we live in. So what do we do about all of this? Well, of course, this polarization is really a national problem. So there's only so much that we can do. But I do believe that each of us starts making little changes, that those begin to add up over time. And so something I've really tried to do over the past few years is to avoid all of the sensationalism. both in the media that I consume, because of course that's going to affect the way that I think about this nation and about people, and also in the language that I use. And to recognize that even though I have political opinions that are very dear to me and that I think, of course, are the right and moral ones and what are best for this country, that if people disagree with me, for the most part, and there's obviously exceptions to this on both sides of the aisle, there's certainly bad actors, for the most part, everyone is trying to advocate for what they think is best for our nation. And so to approach them with good faith, and not with this sense of animosity and skepticism. And doing that, first of all, will just make me happier. I won't walk around just angry at half the country all the time. But secondly, it will help us to be a more united people. Now, if I were a conspiracy theorist, and of course you've seen my videos, and so I certainly am not one of those at all, I would say that there is some type of oligarchy that is, and elites that are truly in control of our nation and who want us common folk to be divided and to be angry at each other, because the divided, angry people are easier to control and to manipulate. But I certainly am not a conspiracy theorist, so I'm sure there are no elites sowing division among us. I'm sure there are no elites advocating for the media to sensationalize things. I'm sure they all want us to have brotherly and sisterly love and kumbaya all together, because we are certainly not run by any kind of elites. Now, obviously I say that somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but it is true that anger and division just hurts us as people, as families, and as a nation. But what do you think? Am I off my rocker here? Am I just a white supremacist? Do I belong with these white Christians that are mentioned in the Punisher issue? Or am I just a reasonable guy that some of you may agree with and some of you may disagree with? But we're all trying to do what is best for each other, for our families, and for our nation. Tell me what you think. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you.